actually, if you just take it back to letting the bean speak for itself. And that's why I really like these constant inlet air temperature profiles, because you're not forcing the do something it doesn't want to do. You're just putting it in and it's telling you it's responding in its own way. And then that's a really nice way for you to then say, oh, so that's how it behaves when you do this. And then you can correct the profile based on it. So it's like you're having a conversation with a coffee. What's more romantic than that, Lee?
That's so
What is more romantic
poetic,
than
bro. That's so nice. This episode is proudly brought to you by Mapper Forward's workshop. It's time to become a coffee consultant. Learn how to diversify your revenue streams and create freedom from your day job while saying goodbye to that alarm clock forever by becoming a consultant within the coffee industry or directly to consumers who have shifted towards home brewing and home roasting. Protect your income from challenging times in the coffee value chain by taking this course today. Go to mapperforward.coffee/workshops or click the link in the show notes for details. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 4 of a 5-part series. And we are with Mark from Dialect Coffee. Mark, we are talking about coffee roasting, past, present, and future. We have talked about the past, present, and future, but now what we want to do is we want to talk about there are a lot of myths in coffee. There are a lot of things that people are told that they should focus on and they shouldn't focus on, and rate of rise is important. And you're like, yeah, but that's not a thing. So that's no insult to anybody or anything like that, but that's literally what you said during this series. So today we're going to talk about what people should focus on when it comes to coffee roasting. What are the important factors that people absolutely should pay attention to when it comes to coffee roasting?
again, it's trying to figure out what people want, and that doesn't necessarily mean what you want.
Oh, you mean the consumer?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one thing that I keep thinking back to now, well, was from this conversation, is like making sure that you buy in the right green coffee as well. I think a lot of people also, glorify that role within a business as well. So being the person that goes to what a producing country is to find the gems and, make those direct relationships. And I think for me as well, maybe it's just because I'm small, but I know a lot of other roasteries out there that are similar size or slightly bigger that still aren't able to do this. But there's reasons that there's green coffee importers. There's reasons that those people exist as a business, and they're not vertically integrated within a coffee roastery. So what I'm trying to say is, focus on the things that you can control, because we're not in a position to, tell the producers what to do, other than to say, these are the flavors that my consumers want. And that if that's the coffee shop, they can say that and they can then go and figure out how to make that happen. But for sure, it's just focus on what you can have control over. And you don't necessarily have to fly to all these different countries to try and taste the coffee at origin. You can get people to bring that in for you and just taste the samples that you've got opportunity to. And I guess that doesn't work with scale, big scale, where you want to start contracting. So maybe that doesn't work with all business models. But then that's my perspective of what I'm doing, at least on my scale, is that you just got to buy the right green coffees, not focus on roasting and trying to get taken out of context, that bit of not focus on roasting.
I won't take that out. I'm not going to clip that out and say, hey folks, this is what Mark said. Never going to happen.
But I think there's many ways that you can simplify all the downstream things by making sure you've got good stuff going in. It's all about the raw material going in. And then, there's ways to tweak that and make it easier for you to roast it the same, to then know what you're going to get coming out. I feel like I'm just going down a rabbit hole.
We could go down many rabbit holes. That's why I said to you, you need to make sure that you come back on the podcast, because there's so many things. And I feel like this was why I was why I was nervous about having a conversation about coffee roasting, because I'm not a coffee roaster and I haven't roasted any batches ever, right? And I feel like having someone like you on the podcast, people might be disappointed at why didn't she talk about this, and why didn't she talk about thermocoupling, and why didn't she blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, except there is like this whole, so many things about coffee roasting that are not about coffee roasting. You know, there's, like you just said, the green coffee buying is such an important part of coffee roasting. And on that, I want to ask you something. As the business model evolves, a lot more producers are deciding to roast their own coffee so that they can create a local market. We have a lot of coffee producers that listen to this podcast. If we're telling people what they should be focusing on, what advice do you have for coffee roasters that are getting started? Or what are the things that are important for them to prioritize thinking about? Versus like some of the myths that they may be consuming online. What should someone focus on if they're at Origin trying to learn how to be a coffee roaster?
So try and figure out how to make coffee you want to drink, because
I
the
love that. Really,
true,
I
right?
love that. It's true.
But I think, people find themselves in this kind of, with the blinders on, focused on this one thing, and they're completely like ignoring everything in their peripheral vision,
Mm-hmm.
and just going full steam this one way that people have, gotten the idea of this is how to do it. And people just kind of completely miss the opportunity to explore more and go in different directions. And that's why I think it's so important for people to have a smaller roaster and not just have their 70-kilo roaster, or one bag roaster. It's really important to have a smaller one so that they can actually figure out what that means. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like not so many people do the product development on a smaller scale because maybe they see it as a waste of time, but that's where the real beauty is exploring it down on the smaller scale, figure out what you can get from those coffees. And then maybe it's an opportunity where actually the green coffee buyer should actually just be the sample roaster. As in, I understand that's going to be quite a lot of work for some people and some businesses, and it may not make sense. But if you have an automatic roaster and you're just pressing a button, you can do the production roasts. And whilst you're
Mm-hmm.
doing that, you can fiddle around, tweak all the little ones and the little sample roaster, and get creative with trying to find the best out of the different samples that are coming in. Or maybe you've got a coffee that tastes well on the cupping table before roasting from the samples, but then you need to figure out you can see it's got potential, but then you spend a bit more time trying to figure out what that potential means and getting the right roast profile. But I think, just don't take all of this stuff for granted. Think more outside the box of this color in this time. And you might be surprised at how delicious it might be that, on something that you roast in 10 minutes, you might actually find it tastes really, really delicious at 4 minutes. Who knows?
I mean, it's a confidence thing, right?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
about being daring enough to consider that I'm going to roast my coffee for 4 minutes and I'm going to sell it, even though a whole bunch of people out there are saying I should be going for 10 minutes and I should be going for this color. Just the same way as different cafes for the longest time. I remember going to America for the first time after being in Australia, like a barista in Australia for ages. You arrive in California and everybody's telling you naturals are shit. I'm like, but we love naturals back in Australia. And they're like, no, naturals are shit. Nobody drinks naturals here. We don't buy naturals and we don't buy coffee from Rwanda. What? That was what I kept getting told. And then that really like blocks your confidence. If you decide that's what you like, now you have to go about finding customers who are brave enough because coffee can be really like, it can be this social stigma that keeps happening. Oh, you're drinking this kind of coffee? You should be buying this kind of coffee. So when it comes to coffee roasters, coffee producers that are setting up their own roasteries, and there are a lot more of them that are either doing one of two things. they're roasting their own coffee and shipping it direct to the end consumer in another country, or they're deciding, I don't want to export as much as my coffee as I used to. I'm going to start building my own local consumers. And so they may be in a community that doesn't typically drink coffee, which is a lot of what happens, right? Those are the people who are the most best positioned to try something different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not I'm not sure how much how well, no, how much is not the right way of saying it. How many producers taste their own coffee and how it's roasted? And a lot of
Mm,
them do just rely on us telling them, oh, that's not good enough, and I don't know how much positive feedback people get either.
yeah.
Because it's like that. It's online. You see all the negative reviews, but not many people leave positive reviews.
Hmm.
But it's all about feedback as well. So if we can, put that power back in their hands to know what that coffee tastes like themselves, that's an amazing thing. Like rather than relying on, the roasters on that side of the power play to say, I'm not going to buy that 87.25 coffee. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Did you pick that number
is that too?
specifically?
Yes.
Do you know that's the second week in a row that someone has picked that cupping score? Last week, the guest didn't know what he was talking about. He had no reference to it and he picked that score, but I know you do know what the reference is. Anyway, keep going.
But I think it's really important, we don't just select based on a cut-off point of some people with the opportunity to say no. It's really
Mm,
important that has the ability to say, well, I roasted it in this way with this roast profile in this roaster, and I think it's worth this. I think that's an amazing thing because that's where the real value is when the producers themselves see the value there. Because that's then the conversation we need to flip around to the consumers buying the copies as well. Because I always have this conversation that because I was in the beer industry before,
hmm.
I saw where craft beer was really coming to a point where people were very happy paying €8 for a can
Mm,
of a double light. People don't bat an eyelid when they pay that much for a beer. But when we think about the coffee, people are like, €4 for a coffee. And then
yeah.
they say, oh, I'll go to one of the chains on the high street. And then they don't bat an eyelid when they pay the same price, like a €6 for a coffee or a hot chocolate, even is probably the same price. And it's, much cheaper quality coffee
Hmm.
roasted with possibly, not the optimal settings because it's what, some people would say too oily for them or
Hmm.
whatever. But they don't bat an eyelid when they pay that much in a chain. But when they go to a small coffee shop, they're like, it's too expensive for that. And it's the value proposition. But it works on both sides of the roasters, I think. And I think that's where the roasters are a little bit stuck sometimes. They're trying to squeeze both sides.
Talking about roasters being stuck, what's your opinion on on decaf and the way that people should approach roasting decaf?
Well, I think there's a certain person that's trying to do an experiment at the moment with decaf. But it seems that when they and I understand that their approach is to be a huge influence on the industry and people not just in coffee but people who want to think about coffee and the YouTube channel that they've got. I think they're a massive voice, and when they started talking about decaf, they said that it's all this like mystery, and they got a lot of things wrong because again it's someone in coffee trying to be an engineer and a scientist, but they're not. But at least they're in a position where they're so influential that they need experts in the field to tell them those things and get their research right to
Mm,
understand that. And I think it also goes back to, this is one of the first conversations I had with Alex Wallace, who's set up Scenery Coffee in the UK, and also with Matt North of Raw Material. They really, enabled me to have a think about decaf in a different light because everyone was like, oh, you have to do this to make it taste good, and it always grinds finer. And then when I started doing all the stuff on roasting it in a certain way, and then doing loads of different roast profiles, and then I characterized the grinding, it was like they behave the same. What's happening here? So it's like you just have to change the grinder setting and you can get the same characteristics out, like same brewing performance, but it all comes from all those assumptions that people are like, you've got to do it in this way. And it turns out, well, maybe they're just, making up for the fact that they're doing the first roast of the day. Therefore, they have to roast it in this way to counteract that. And automatically it becomes darker color. And people are like, that's too dark. I'll roast lighter. But then don't realize that the development of the bean is such that everything after first crack is like massively dependent on that. And so I think it's all just wiggling its way back to kind of saying, well, actually, if you just take it back to letting the bean speak for itself. And that's why I really like these constant inlet air temperature profiles, because you're not forcing the do something it doesn't want to do. You're just putting it in and it's telling you it's responding in its own way. And then that's a really nice way for you to then say, oh, so that's how it behaves when you do this. And then you can correct the profile based on it. So it's like you're having a conversation with a coffee. What's more romantic than that, Lee?
That's so
what is more
poetic,
romantic
bro. That's so nice. I'm a songwriter, and I'm like, so this is really such a lovely, and this is one of those weird things that I find, beautifully weird things about coffee roasters. Coffee roasters tend to be rather poetic and romantic from that perspective, right? Like they definitely see the thing behind the science, behind the engineering when it comes to coffee roasting. It's really, really beautiful. Like I say, coffee roasters are like a specific kind of human. Very complex, very complicated, very, very deep. All the coffee roasters I've met, anyway, the good ones are like that. Anyway, all right, we've got one episode to go. We are literally talking about when we mapped out this series, we said what you don't need to give a fuck about when it comes to coffee roasting. So join us for the final episode of this series in the next episode. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, friends. Please don't forget to show us some love by subscribing, liking, commenting, and most of all, sharing this podcast with your friends. Check the show notes for links, including our sponsors and our Patreon. And stay tuned for more great conversations on the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward.